Okay, welcome back everyone to a brand new episode of Crypto and Muay Thai Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Brookins. Today, I am very, very excited to introduce my very special guest, Jon Fitch. So for those of you who may not know, but I'm sure everyone that's listening and watching this particular podcast knows very well who Jon Fitch is. He is a longtime, top 5, top 10 competitor in the UFC, Bellator, and even going back earlier days in that. So Jon, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast. How you feeling today?
Feeling pretty good. Feeling good in my retirement.
Yeah, I was going to say congratulations, on the retirement. It's a rather new sort of experience. So how does that feel to officially be embarking on the next step of your career?
Feels good because I feel like I have the time to put full effort into everything else I've been doing the last couple of years, where when you're training for a fight, you don't have time or the energy to do a lot of those things.
Yeah, I can imagine that it's probably difficult to dedicate like the full faculties to, training, given that is incredibly important, but also some of the different initiatives that you've been working on that you're, seem pretty excited to give life to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I initially got into like crypto back, early 2010 issues. Back when it was around $200 or so, and I kind of got out of it because it's just too much was going on, and it was kind of a poisonous environment. So I just kind of it's like I have faith in the math, and I just held on to the assets I had already incurred at the time, and I'm just kind of writing it out now.
Oh, nice. So you stayed in it. So I talked to a lot of people and even some, other fighters who got in not as early as 2010, which is pretty early.
2013 or something.
Okay. But you're like, so you got in at Bitcoin and, maybe a handful of other assets, and you have held on to them. You haven't sold out.
Yeah, I even had an ether mine for a little bit.
That's super cool. That's super cool, because whenever I talk to other people, even other fighters too, I think the craziness that ensued in 2017 and then like the resulting bear market in 2018 kind of shook a lot of people out. So they were happy they got in, maybe made a little bit of money, but ultimately kind of that crazy pandemonium ultimately shook them out. So it's cool. That you're still in it. Well, I guess at 2013, you saw some ups and downs.
I started reading about it when it was for like $20, and then I think the Mount Gox like crash thing started happening, and then I got into it after that because it still sounded like good. Boy, hey, get it out! I got a new puppy, and he's barking at the neighbors doing remodeling. But no, yeah. So. Oh man, I kind of already saw some turmoil, but it just rebounded so well. I thought there was more to it than people were saying. I never put more in that I couldn't afford to lose. It was kind of like playing roulette or going and sit down at the blackjack table for me. So I just put money into some things that I thought long term were going to look better, and I think I did the right thing.
No, 100%. I mean, looking back in hindsight, it definitely seems like,
Yeah, because people were worried about when it hit, almost 20,000 and then crashed again, so-called crashed. It was still way up from where I had entered the market. So people were calling me dumb for still having Bitcoin. I was like, I've profited.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even now, it's still not back to 20,000, but you're still way up from wherever you entered. So, So what were some of the things that got you interested in this originally?
Well, Ron Paul, I think back when he was running for president, he was trying to run on sound money, and I had been paying taxes for enough years to realize how bad of an idea it is to have just paper money not tied to really anything or tied to oil and get pulled into wars all the time. So, I thought I liked the idea of, paperless transactions and stores of money where you didn't need the bank, you were your own bank. Just sounded secure, sounded like an easier way to do a lot of things. And I figured if a fraction of the world population started to use it, I'd end up having a lot of money.
Pretty clever and pretty smart. Not a lot of people are able to connect the dots whenever they hear something like that, or especially in the early days.
Mhm.
It still sounded a bit kind of mythical, made up. I mean, I still have conversations to this day where people just can't quite wrap their heads around it. They're like, well, what is it? Like, I can't touch it. It's not tangible. So you kind of have to go through that process. But you got it straight out of the jump, and from Ron Paul, no less.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it wasn't even like he was talking about cryptocurrency. He was just talking about, just sound money. I think that was his tagline. But like economically, like realizing how much money we're printing, even right now, like
Yeah.
we're printing tons of money. A lot of people are out of work, but the stocks are up somehow. Yeah. So I think it's just a good way to kind of hedge your bets, have a little bit of mutual funds, have some gold, have some silver, have some Bitcoin, just, have some ammo, spread it
Pretty,
out.
pretty balanced, pretty rational. So from your experience, like you've been around a ton of fighters, like in your career, do a lot of people, within, I guess, the mixed martial arts community, specifically, they think like you, or is that just kind of something that came with you innately, maybe, from your undergraduate background, maybe just your general interests, or anything like that?
No, I just think I think I have a kind of an analytical mind. My dad was an engineer. My sister does interior design, so there's some creative elements in there too. I think that allowed me to think in ways that helped me win fights. I wasn't always the fastest or strongest, whatever, in any of the fights or the sports that I played. But I knew how to work hard. I knew how to strategize to win. I knew how to use what I could do in order to win. So I think I just, the ability to have some kind of pattern recognition, I think, um, has helped a little bit, and that's one of the reasons why it seemed like a good thing to put a little bit of money into. It wasn't a huge risk, but like it was basically me being like, hey, let's not spend money this weekend and buy $100 worth of Bitcoin.
Got you. Got
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly whenever, financial advisors or anything like that talk to their clients, they say, don't put in more than you can lose, but look at it from, kind of like a probabilistic way, sort of like what you're talking about, where, this could go to zero, but that's not the end of the world if it does. But if it doesn't, the factors of what you could appreciate in price are quite high, 10, 20, 30x from where you entered. So no, I can see I can see the analytical nature of kind of how you're talking. So you mentioned using that like within like pattern recognition within your fights. So whenever you got into this sport, did you know, like straight out of the gate, whenever you looked at it across the board, you're like, all right, I'm not as fast. Maybe, I'm not as technically sound in the stand up or in the ground or maybe in the wrestling, but I know that if I just do this thing or these combinations of things well enough, then I can ascend to the top, 10%, 5%, of the crop. And if so, like, what did you see and what did you think? I guess that you kind of had a little bit of an advantage on.
No, I mean a lot of it is understanding where you have the expert knowledge at, and if I could get into a clinch, if I could get into a wrestling scramble, 9 times out of 10, most guys, I'm going to be in that situation. So it was easier for me to force fights into those situations where I could dominate, and then the guy who was much more versed in grappling and submissions than me didn't have the advantage on me because I was putting him where I flourished. So it was a way I developed to kind of control the situations. If I can control you and put you into my fight, then I gain all the leverage.
Got you. So originally, whenever you're thinking or, kind of having that line of thought or process, do you think that just your pressure and your wrestling is going to be able to take you there 9 times out of 10, being able to get to some scramble or some clinch? Or go ahead.
Fighting, there's only so many arms, legs, and head on a person. There's only so many ways that their body can move, And if you get enough reps in with enough people and enough bodies, you start recognizing everywhere they're going and what they're going at what time. You start being able to predict kind of where they're going to move, and then you start to be able to get them to move for you. You use feints or movements, and then you're kind of controlling that person with that ability at the same time.
Got you. Got you. Is that something that, you worked on specifically, or was kind of ingrained in you at AKA? So was that something that Javier Mendez was a big proponent of, that kind of instilled in you guys?
Doing things over and over and over and over again. That's always been just the way just to learn things, because I was never like a natural. So I always had to drill things 10 times more than everybody else. And I think that repetition allowed me to start seeing more and more things, and then just a lot of goes. Like I spent a lot of time in the training room drilling and training with people and getting an opportunity to see those patterns emerge over and over and over again.
Got you. Got you. I think that makes a lot of sense in all honesty. I mean, it's just practical to where you want to control the pace and you want to put the fight where it gives you the highest probability of success. So were there any fights where, you felt like you just couldn't get them there, no matter how hard you tried? They were one step ahead, or, they were just, too strong or too technical or whatever it may be.
I fought GSP. That was the thing. I couldn't get him into my spot, into where I needed to put him. I got hit with a couple big overhand rights too that made doing the job a lot harder. But I needed to force that clinch. I needed to make him, exert more energy. I needed to hit more takedowns, which I just was not able to develop.
Do you think it's because he was, GSP is notorious for being well educated, like going deep in all the sciences that kind of comprise MMA? Was it because of, that, where he's just super technical?
Well, he had that ability. He had strength, speed, enough wrestling knowledge to stop takedowns and to hit takedowns, enough power and movement on his feet to be competent everywhere. But no, him being able to shut me down and keep me at range, and then my game plan was kind of not where it should have been at the time, because at the time he wasn't that far away from having gotten knocked out by Matt Serra.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking in my head, like, oh, well, he's chinny. Like, you just gotta, touch him on the chin a couple times and you got him. So the mindset of thinking, I'm going to win this by landing a good punch or two within that 5 rounds is a different of a mindset switch to, I'm gonna use my stand up to get in close, grapple, wrestle, take him down.
Got you.
Planning mistake, but that could be fixed after the first round. It just wasn't. And then not getting to the positions I needed to.
Yeah, for sure. What round was it whenever you got clipped with the overhand right? Because that's one of the cleaner punches.
First round and the third round.
Okay, because I was going to say.
I threw a really bad leg kick on the right side where I just put my head right in the middle, and he clipped me with that overhand right. And then beginning of the third round, I threw a lead hook and dropped my hand after I landed the hook and dropped it straight down. So he just covered and went over the top. So I landed, I got hit twice big with the right hands. So that, you start seeing double. It makes it a little bit harder to do what you need to do.
For sure. I mean, you're talking about adjusting your game plan on the fly based upon what's going on. And it's kind of hard to do that, whenever you're getting caught with some pretty good punches. So how do you see, as you've been in this sport, I mean, you just recently retired, what, a week ago, 2 weeks ago? How has the evolution, of the sport, how have you seen that grow? And do you still think that kind of like those same principles kind of apply, where it's like, this is my skill set, I'm going to enforce my skill set, I'm not going to let my weaknesses kind of take me down, but I'm just going to round them off and strengthen my strengths, and then just try to move my opponent into my areas? Do you still think that is kind of possible in the modern day?
It is. I mean, that's the way you win fights. That's the way you should be winning fights. But the reward system's a little bit skewed in the terms of exciting fights and fights that are basically the fights that are easy to sell for the promoter. if you're a part, if you can give a fight that's easy to sell for the promoter, then that puts you in line for bigger shots. So a lot of guys will abandon their game plans towards certain victory, and they'll hang it out on the line a little bit more in order to try to get the fight to be exciting.
Got you. Got you. That makes sense.
Mhm.
I mean, at the end of it, I guess it's kind of this new precedent.
It's a business, and you need to get paid, but you're taking the gamble of, do I take a high risk fight in order to push excitement, where if I get clipped, my whole career could be sidetracked, or do I just win and make sure that I climb the ladder no matter what?
Yeah, I mean, and also you got to think about long-term effects too. I mean, you said you're an analytical person, obviously,
That's
well spoken. So
one reason why I would retire. Like, are you being paid enough to pay for your after fight career care when you're in your 70s and 80s? That's really what you should look at it as, like, the fighting that you're doing now, is that money that you can put away that's going to pay for a nurse to wipe your ass when you're 75?
I mean, I guess a lot of the lower rungs where those fighters feel that pressure to where it's like, I got to put on a show so that I stand out to Scott Coker, to Dana White. No, 100%. They're
Now,
probably not.
so many fighters and so many fights. Like, what type of crazy fight do you really have to do? Like, what level? You got to kill somebody. You're gonna have to die. Your arms, you have to get ripped off. Like, you're competing with a ton of fights already that were pretty exciting.
Yeah.
If you're counting on just being an exciting fighter, excuse me, just an exciting fighter, then eventually, like, what's the end game?
Yeah. I mean,
We're gonna call for the barbed wire fence match soon enough.
it's kind of like the conification of the sport, to where it's the sell fights. It's the, it's like, all right, well, I walk around at 55. Sure, I'll fight at 70, or I'll fight at 85.
It's the monopolization that the UFC has instilled in the sport that has pushed that, because the promoter no longer has to invest in promoting the fighter anymore. They just take the guy who's already got buzz around him and they throw him on a card, and they just use that guy's hype or that buzz. They take the easy stuff. They don't want to, like, actually develop anybody. They want to take a big fat juicy fruit that's already ready to squeeze, and they just squeeze them until there's nothing left, and they'll throw them out.
Got you. Do you think that's a difference between what's, kind of what's happening in MMA or UFC specifically versus, boxing? Do you still think that, like, boxing kind of develops their prospects a little bit more?
There's more return on investment for the boxing promoter, to invest into that athlete. They'll take guys that they feel are promising, that aren't even pro yet because they had a good amateur career. They'll put them up in an apartment. They'll give them trainers. They'll set up all their fights. They'll do everything. Those guys don't have to do anything but show up and fight. And then eventually, if those guys are good and they don't wash out, like, they start fighting for titles. They start fighting for rankings. They start making 6-figure, 7-figure fights. Then the promoter ends up making that money back. There's more promoters available to the guys because they cross promote, that puts competition in the promoters. If they don't take care of the guy, they'll sign with somebody else who will take care of him and help get him ready for the fight.
Got you. Do you impart, like, some of these words of wisdom to some of, the newer fighters? So I'm just assuming that even though you're retired, this is kind of in your DNA. You're still hanging around the gym. You still have some influence on the up and coming fighters, that are around there.
It's difficult to get them to listen on that because there's no clear steps towards success now. So it's kind of hard to get guys on board with a lot of stuff. Even they know it's messed up. They're like, oh, well, I'm fighting now and I want to fight now. I don't want to wait 5 years, 8 years to get all this stuff settled through courts and whatever crap. So my advice to a lot of those guys is they need to take time and energy to develop their social media type of persona and standard, their brand. They need to have a fan base that follows them and is attached to their, have an email list and people they can reach out to regardless of whether the promoter's promoting them or not. Because then they can kind of develop their own notoriety, their own group of fans, and they become more profitable for the promoters to use as fighters.
Yeah, and they can also have a kind of in negotiation, they call it a BATNA, best alternative to negotiate agreement, but like kind of having, a backup plan, essentially, to where, so if they were to hit the free open market and UFC's like, no, no worries, like you can go test the waters, they're more marketable whenever they hit out there.
You take your analytics and be like, look how many views I get per week. Look how many whatever I get. Look how many people watch on fight nights when I fight.
Yeah, I think the best example of kind of like what you're talking about, this new age of combining social media as a way to help drive your career, there's probably no better example than Ryan Garcia in boxing, given, he's done a good bit in his respective sport, but his like Instagram famousness far outweighs probably what he's been able to accomplish in the ring so far.
And look at what Logan Paul and KS1 or KSW, and look what they've done for boxing. I mean, you could say it's not a good thing, but you're talking about guys who have zero experience, sold how many pay-per-view buys, how many millions did they make, just because they built themselves up as through social media first. If those guys can do it, and they're not boxers, there's, you know what I mean, they're just some guys, knuckleheads who created a beef and everybody wanted to watch them fight. If those guys can do it, like, why can't somebody who's got some actual skill put some shit together and get a following?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, even so, I don't know if it's confirmed, but even they're talking Mayweather wanting to fight Logan Paul.
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Remember, you're as a fighter, you are a vehicle for advertising. Okay, like no one really cares about how good of a fighter you are. Like, people do, because that's what brings people to watch and pay. But like, the reason the show gets put on, the reason the promoters exist, the reason why there's a belt and all that stuff is because an advertiser somewhere wants people to look at his product he's trying to sell. And what better way to get people to look at their product than in the commercial between the sporting event they want to watch, the football game, the boxing match, the MMA fight. So you can either, like, whatever, poo-poo it, or you can accept it and make some money while you're also already planning something that you love doing.
Interesting. That actually makes total sense. I mean, obviously, you look at the cage.
Kind of a hard pill to swallow. I have a hard pill with it too, because it's like, as a martial artist, you're like, oh, I need to be humble. I need to, like, no, it should just be about my fighting technique and my ability and my hard work. But like, if you're not selling yourself, like, nobody else is.
No, for sure. I mean, you've got, what's the shelf life? I don't know the specific statistics of, an MMA fighter that turns pro. Let's just say it's 7 to 8 years. They start, go ahead.
UFC average fight career is less than one fight. Less
Okay.
than 1 year. Yeah, less than 1 year.
Okay. So, so for the sake of
the main card fighters, and this is through our lawsuit, we got these numbers, but through the main event fighters, it's like 2.25 years is their career span.
Wow.
Average
Yeah.
career.
That's kind of startling whenever you think about that in terms of what that means for you monetarily or for the fighter.
Very high turnover rate. And a lot of these guys, they only fight, if they're lucky, twice a year.
Yes.
That's the biggest complaint you get from most fighters, is not even like how little their pay is, but it's like they're only fighting once every 9 months or something. And it's not enough to feed somebody. 12 and 12, once every 9 months is not handling it.
No, that's 100% not going to handle it at all. So, I mean, to your point, having, butts in the seats whenever we could actually have fans watching fights or selling pay-per-views now, you have that whole back 3/4 of your life as a competitor to be a humble martial artist, to focus on the craft. But it's like, in this very small time, you kind of got to do what you have to do, to wring as much profitability out of this short lifespan that kind of like is, professional mixed martial artist career.
And the fighters too, the younger fighters, need to start thinking earlier about what it is they want to do when they're done. Because, they can use their fighting career as the thing that lifts them up into the next stage. So it's you're advertising for yourself. You're advertising for your post career job. And that could be going back into the workforce, like how you represented yourself as a professional athlete may shine through and help you get that sales job at a big corporation because you got a big name and you can cut $1 million deals because people want to go out and have drinks with you.
That's pretty clever and something that I hadn't thought about prior, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you now have a platform. If you market it right, you now have a platform that you can go out and start your own business or, get a well-paying job or whatnot.
Yes, exactly. And that's the idea of we have this technological connection going on now. Like we're getting more isolated, but at the same time, we're not because we're getting too exposed to more people. And we're picking up kind of like our own personal villages. Like if you open up a store or you had a service that you had to sell it and you lived in a small village by the sea, like you would know everybody, like they would know you for your lifetime. So if you did something screwed up, they'd probably know if you did that thing that screwed up. But if you did good things all the time, they would probably know that too. So it's like there's this anonymousness online, but there's also this connectivity too. Because like you're kind of getting stuck with the same people.
Yes, especially now because everything's international. So you could find out that, Jon Fitch is huge in Albania. And all of a sudden you've got this enormous ability to sell.
Great show on
What'd you
Thursday Night Live talk show. He's up huge in Albania.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so Marvin the Hitman Hagler, he's huge in Italy. Like he's an action star. He's the Arnold Schwarzenegger of like Italian cinema. I'm paraphrasing for what I've seen on Joe Rogan. So, if I'm incorrect, internet, I apologize. But that's one of those like weird sort of like circumstances that, just like you said, he retired with his faculties after he lost the Sugar Ray, said, screw this. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to be able to speak. And he took his platform to somewhere else and, is for all intents and purposes quite successful and quite content.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, that should kind of be cool to people that, we're not really falling into like chaos where we don't have our villages and our people anymore. It's just kind of readjusting to the online type stuff. But at the same time, it should younger people, like this shit's going to follow you around. Like, carry yourself a little bit higher than you think you should.
So with that, I mean, we've talked about or danced around it a couple of times talking that some of the younger fighters that you engage with or been around, they don't necessarily want to listen to, a variety of input or what it is.
Period.
No, 100%, 100%. So do you find that early fighters, like younger fighters, they don't listen to anything that you say? Like even if you're trying to help them out and giving, time tested, whether it be
mash them with something over and over and over again, that's usually the best way for them to like come back and be like, hey, how did you do that? But usually like everybody's got an answer.
Exactly. Everyone's got a reason and an answer as to why.
Oh, well, you're really strong right now. Okay. That's what you want to think. That's why I held you down and beat you up for 5 minutes, just because I'm strong. That's the only reason.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And they almost look at sparring as if like that's an end all be all to where it's like, yeah, I won sparring today, or I
think they'll take breaks on rounds. The guys, the gym hero spars, like, first off, you have zero reason to do more than 3 to 5 rounds ever when you're sparring. The guys that go in and spar 10 rounds, like light sparring, and it's not really light sparring. It's like 80%, 82%. Like, you're not really getting anything out of it because you're doing the same stupid shit over and over and over again. You're just training your body to react in a stupid way every time. Like, do your 3 to 5 rounds and then drill. Do it the right way over and over and over again after you're already tired. But they don't do the drill part.
So how do you like to spar? Is it heavy sparring, Dutch style, or is it more like Thai sparring?
When you're just starting out, like, you do need some hard sparring. You gotta push yourself a little bit. You gotta understand like what happens when you make a mistake and you come in with your hands down, whatever. Like there's learning lessons, and there's a there's a line that you have to learn to cross, and that's you step into that conflict. You step into the fray. Like not everybody has that. It's hard to do. You need to build the guys up into it. Don't throw somebody out into the hard sparring right away, because that just gets people gun shy, and they can never do it. It's harder for them to cross that line again. But you do the Dutch sparring, and then after a while you pick it up to light sparring. You need skilled people to work with the unskilled people, so they know that it's like a dad wrestling around with his kids. Like you gotta be the bigger person, and guide them a little bit, so they're not biting or gouging eyes or doing something that's crossed the line. You know what I mean? But yeah, but as you get older, like you don't need I'm 30 fights deep professionally, 40 fights deep professionally. I don't need the super hard rounds of sparring anymore. I know how to fight. I've been through the fight. I know what that feeling's like. I know how to mentally put myself there and get all of the same physiological effects from mentally putting myself there. So I'll focus way more on the Dutch sparring, way more on this drilling at that point. And, I'll do even two-way type drills where we'll put 5 minutes on the clock, and it's punching combination to the clinch, to your takedown, pass the guard, ground and pound, hit the submission, bottom guy escapes, works back up to his feet, and then he goes offense. And you do 5 minutes of that with tight technique, you'll be thrown up after a few rounds.
Yeah, it's it's funny because sometimes I'll go to the wrestling class, which is more like a submission wrestling and grappling class, and we've done very similar drills to kind of like how you're talking about. And I mean, yeah, it's pretty tough to be able to gut through it, specifically after the practice. Like it's at the end of your practice, but you have to want to stay sharp as much as possible.
Yeah, some of the best training you ever get happens after you're already tired.
I totally agree, because that's whenever, I mean, for me, I think that's where people need to be the most mentally focused, whenever you're tired, because whenever you're huffing and puffing, that's whenever I tell my guys, like, hey, that's when your technique needs to be the sharpest. Like you can't throw a lazy jab out there. You can't throw a lazy cross. It can't be a lazy kick to where you're leaving your head in the center line. That's where, whenever I say technique, focus, do everything perfect, this is when it shows up, is whenever you're tired. But if you're not doing that correctly and just using all muscle, saying, I'm going to rev this kick in, you're not stepping through, not rotating, I'm going to see it when you're tired, and you're just going to be essentially a walking punching bag.
Yep. Sometimes too, people get in their own way so much that when they're tired, sometimes they take the blocks off. That makes sense. It's like they put mental restrictions on themselves. Like, I can't really do this, or I've got these things I'm worried about, or whatever that mental thing is that's holding them back. They're too tired to think about it. So now they're just struggling for air. They're thinking in, out. Hey, and then when you start throwing the punches and the kicks, like, it starts flowing.
I got you. That actually makes sense. I don't know if I've seen that, to where I'm like, oh, now they're starting to get in that like flow state whenever they're not thinking anymore, whenever they're tired. But that makes a lot of sense, actually, to where they're no longer in their head and they're thinking. For me, it's like, you've got to have that prereq though, to where they've already been there before and have that mental like mindset to where, yeah, I'm tired, it doesn't matter, we're just going to keep going. Like nothing lasts forever. We're just going to keep going.
Yeah, you got to focus on mental training while you're getting that physical training in too. A lot of people miss the connection.
I agree, and I see it. I see it more with the young fighters, because there's a overemphasis on wanting things now.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's younger generational type thing.
100%. I mean, whenever I came up and
at all.
they want it now, and it's not necessarily their fault. It's a byproduct of the culture, because like everything's handed to you now, like prime now. I want things now.
I think a lot of it too is just not understand the amount of work and effort some things take. Like, they don't see the building process; they see the final results, and they're like, "Oh, I want to go do that." I'm like, "Well, you should probably do these things first. If you can do these things first, then you can build up."
No, you hit the nail. You hit the nail on the head. I mean, I always have to tell my guys, it's like, hey, I've been doing Muay Thai for 15 years. So whenever people come in and be like, I want to do a hard kick, show me how to throw a hard kick, or show me how to throw, how do you do that thing in the clinch? It's like,
Your footwork first. Can you even move?
it's like, show me, yeah, it's like, show me your stance, show me how, yeah.
Cartwheel kick. Show me that.
Oh, everyone wants the spinning elbow, the flying knee, all the jumping shit, and it's like, you've got to be a master of the basics. So if you don't have that, you're not going to have anything.
Yeah, it's all about the basics.
It's all about the basics, and everyone just sees the process. And I think that's kind of, I've seen that manifested a lot in gym hopping within the MMA community, or at least within the community that I've been exposed to where it's like, oh man, just like you said, like I keep getting beat up by Jon, in this one spot. I'm going to go train with this other gym that's like a really good wrestling gym or a really good jiu-jitsu gym.
Fighters whose fights used to do that stuff too. It must have been everybody else around me. It wasn't me.
Yeah, and it's like I'm gonna do that. Then I'm gonna come back and then I'll be able to beat Jon in that sparring match or submission grappling sparring. And it's like that's not how this process works.
Yep.
It's kind of interesting. But so before we wrap up, we talked a lot. A variety of topics today, starting with crypto and then, weaving all the way through. But do you think that one of the things that you sort of mentioned is the lack of fights for some of these fighters that are struggling to support themselves, trying to balance that with the notion that, finances, or having the ability to put your finances on a stronger footing, almost is as critical as your diet, your training, your strength and conditioning. So how do you've been there, you've done it, you got the t-shirt. How do you explain that, or how would you explain that, like practically or theoretically?
No, yeah, you need multiple streams of income. Like I was a little bit stubborn early on. I was like, oh, I'm going to make all my money through fighting. I'll make millions, I'll do all this, whatever. You don't have full control. You don't really see the future. So you need to be just putting yourself in as many pots as you can that can turn into something that pays. I think a lot in your 20s, you need to be developing skills and finding out what you're kind of good at, and then figure out ways to make money off of them, even if it's your hobby. Like my hobbies today usually revolve around something that I can sell in some way. Even I've been shooting arrows the last like year almost, so I'm going to try to turn that into a sponsorship someday. Like I'm gonna get some gear. I'm gonna get some gear and some arrows paid for eventually. So like, be putting yourself out there in ways that are fun. But if you can make money off of something that's fun too, if you like woodworking, you like fixing furniture up, there's all kinds of ways to do those things and then profit.
That makes sense. I think that's great advice. And last question before we kick you out of here. Are you just still a sound money only, or has some of this other fervor within digital assets kind of caught your eyes? And if so, which ones?
I am, I'm mostly still in just Bitcoin, and I have a little bit of Ether. I'm up on Twitch, checking out what the BSV stuff is about. But mostly I'm a little bit stepped back, looking at it and watching from afar and seeing what happens. There's a lot of talk around other things, but like it's a really hard space to follow.
It's a super hard space to follow because everything moves at light speed, and there's always something coming up that you're like, shit, I wish I'd have gotten that, or why didn't I know about that? So don't feel that's an entirely normal feeling like that you have. But what I will say with that is Bitcoin is still by far the gold standard. So don't, this is, I think where you're at right now with no intents to sell that 100% is spot on. But Ethereum and some of these other adjacent, sectors that it's kind of growing, with decentralized finance being one of the hotly debated ones in 2020. I think those are some things that, gradually looking to brush up on, because I think they're game changers in a lot of ways, but ultimately it is providing common people, the regular people, the retail investor, the ability to have access to not just stores of value, but also venture capital type investments for technology that's kind of like building the future in the current present day without needing to, know a bunch of VCs down in LA or up in San Francisco or anything like that. So it's a very interesting space. I think it, might behoove you now in your new retirement, just to gradually dip your toes back into some things. And if you ever have any questions on specific stuff, I'm more than happy to always
I've been putting up content on Rockfin, and part of that platform payout is the Ray token, which I think is something from Ether.
Yeah, I mean, we can go on and on, but if there's, I'll send you, if you've ever got any specific questions, I'll send you more content than probably you'll wish I had I had sent you. But before we leave, is there anything that you wanted to say that maybe we didn't get a chance to cover?
Just check out jonfitch.net. You can sign up for the newsletter. I reach out just about every week, let people know what's going on. I got free courses and stuff on Gumroad with some fitness stuff, some a neck care guide that I use to help fix my neck. And then I've got all the podcasts and everything going on, so just keep an eye out.
Awesome. Jon, this was an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to have a chat, and hopefully look forward to be able to have you back on the podcast in, the near future.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.